Welcome to this afternoon's session. I'd like to thank you guys for joining us, and especially the panelists. I am Cora Kavyaktok, also the owner of Little Inuit Photography, originally from Cambridge Bay, Nunavut, and now residing in Alberta. So I will just leave it up to each of you to introduce yourself.
My name is Okpik. I'm originally from Kavyaktok, Nunavut. I live in Montreal now.
My name is Grenier. I'm originally from Qinnirajaattuq in Nunavut, and now also living in Montreal.
Hi, I'm Taalrumiq, King, originally from Qinnirajaattuq in the Nunavut Settlement region, and I live in northern BC. Happy to be here with you all.
Hello everyone, my name is April Allen and I am from Qinnirajaattuq and I'm currently living in Labrador City.
Wonderful. Hi everyone. Did you want to just give us a little bit, tell us about your journey of getting to the stage today? Who would like to kick us off with that?
Are you looking at me?
Sorry, you're at the end.
Well, I have my own business in clothing. Mostly I do parkas and also bags and silapaks. I started a long time ago, 25 years I've been in a clothing business. And after I studied from fashion design at the LaSalle College, I started with Nunavut Creations when I finished. And Nunavut Creation was one of the subsidiary company of Okpik Corporation, and it was a clothing business. And when I started, I had no background whatsoever, and I had no mentor or guidance when we started. And I don't think, I wouldn't advise anyone to go on that route. I think it would be better if anyone would start in the business to start with a company and to learn the ins and outs of the industry. And yeah, that's my background.
So my, background started with my mom and my grandma sitting in the living room learning how to sew traditional clothing. And for many, many years, I started beading when I was probably around 8 years old. And out of necessity, I started sewing. So sewing a lot of traditional clothing. And then as the years went on, I started learning other traditional sewing skills from different people within the community that were being brought into the community. And then I started also teaching my beading skills to others. And then I had the opportunity to collaborate with Beatrice, Beatrice Deer, who's got a booth that everybody probably knows Beatrice anyways, we collaborated on a couple pieces and working on a very, very traditional, bringing back traditional garments, and then eventually creating our own Acclaimed, which was very contemporary, using traditional materials. And then this wonderful, beautiful mentor lady here, she invited me to collaborate with her also on the dress for the Governor General. And that kind of just sparked something in me. So I don't have any formal training, but I think that the hours and hours of my grandmother making me undo stitches and redo them because they were not perfect was probably the best kind of formal training I could have gotten while she was still alive. So yeah, that sparked something in me to start, I guess, exploring a little bit more what the fashion industry has to offer. And then I was lucky enough to also work with Christina at a residency, and just started getting tons of projects from there. So yeah, it's been a fun journey so far.
Just echoing what Julie said, I learned also from my mom, like to highlight everything that she's taught, the traditional knowledge. And I come from a long matrilineal line of expert Inuit seamstresses and creatives, and who sewed for survival. So I feel that it's really a privilege to be able to show my creations on the runway as high fashion. In a way, it's a form of survival, because this is how I support myself and my family. So I grew up sewing. My earliest memories are my mom making me my own sewing kit with a pilot biscuit box. From there, I was always drawn to creative fields, so I'm a journeyman hairstylist. You can do that. And then in my undergrad, I majored in human ecology, where I was able to study all the home ec courses, which included fashion design. And now I'm a graduate student at Emily Carr University of Art and Design, doing my Master of Fine Arts, and my focus is on Inuvialuit fashion. So I guess I ended up with these opportunities just by having the courage to put myself out there, to share my work online. It can be really scary, but just taking that leap of faith, and then having my community and complete strangers be so supportive really helped to push me along to take more opportunities, start applying for everything, professional development, and everything just keeps building, and just networking, supporting other artists, other designers, sharing opportunities. All those things have led me here today to be alongside all these amazing designers.
Isn't that so beautiful? I started when I was younger. My mom taught me at a very young age how to knit and sew. And as Christina said, I also come from a long line of Inuit seamstresses in my family as well. It wasn't a career that I was always into. I was a dental therapist for many years. But over time I developed an illness, so I had to retire out of that field of work. And then about 5 years ago, I refound my love for sewing and beading, and I have been doing it ever since. I started out very small. I was making, beaded earrings, and my mom and I actually volunteered to make like over 400 face masks during the pandemic. And from there, everything just grew. The more events I went to, the more symposiums, the more art conventions that I went to, I kind of delved into our culture and our traditions more. And from there, I just, picked up more with making bigger things and clothing, and that's kind of where it all started.
Wonderful. So, what was the driving force behind you taking the leap into the fashion world? Some of you kind of answered that question, but was there a driving force that you're like, okay, this is it, I'm going to do this. Let's do this thing. we don't have to start with Victoria. Anybody else wants to jump in?
I didn't really talk into detail about how I started. Like, it was birthed in me more than a long time ago. When I was younger, I grew up around ladies that were making clothing for their families, for their children, and I always liked the new style that they created every year for all their children, and including my mother, who clothed us like we were 8 of us every year with new clothing, and I think it started back then, and then it just, yeah, that was my beginning of how I started.
Yeah, I think for me it was really because sewing out of necessity for a long time. My mom not stopped, but she was very busy with her career for a long time, so she didn't have the time to sew. And my grandmother unfortunately passed away a long time ago, and so there was a need for one of us to kind of pick up that job, and so I started sewing out of necessity. But having the opportunity to sew and think completely outside the box and outside of the lines of a pattern is what really just sparked something in me. It brought me to a completely different space, and I just can't get enough. So that's just something that I keep wanting to work with now. Yeah.
For me, it was like a whole series of events kind of happening concurrently. The main one being putting my work out there online on dedicated social media pages, creating fun videos to share the work that I was making, which was just an extension of sewing for my children, sewing for my family and myself, and then just, trying new things, stepping outside of the box of traditional clothing, incorporating materials that were newer to us. And all that momentum just gave me some recognition as a designer. And we are in a time where Indigenous fashion is so in demand right now. Designers and artists and our work are getting the respect that it deserves, and there's more spaces for recognition. And it's just a lack of representation, not because of a lack of talent, but just we haven't had these opportunities to share our work in spaces, like on the world stage, like with April's case. So I guess just being ready for these opportunities, keeping my skills current, having goals to work toward, applying for opportunities, and just the fact that there aren't a lot of Inuit fashion designers on the runway, so yeah.
Yeah, like I said earlier, I started, it was basically a healing journey for me. I started out, just trying to figure my life out after my first career ended, so that's how I began. And like Victoria mentioned earlier, like she wouldn't recommend doing it unless you have all the support that you need. And for me, I was fortunate to have such a huge support system. You guys are two of them, Christina and Julie. We're always there to support one another and lean on one another when we need. There's such a huge community within the Indigenous fashion world and Inuit fashion world, and I'm very fortunate to have such a huge support system. I see so many faces in here who have supported me on my journey, so thank you.
What an awesome time we live in, hey, where we can incorporate our traditional fashions and bring them into today's world. It's so special. So at what point, Julie, let's start with you so that we give Victoria a little break here. At what point did you feel like you made it? Was there a pivotal point?
I'm not sure I feel that way yet.
You have.
I guess it was not long after, or actually I guess maybe hours after Mary Simon came out with her dress on, and then the media requests started coming in, and having like Fashion Magazine reach out and say, hey, we want to write a piece, can we interview you? I guess that kind of it took a while to sink in, but it was a moment. So those types of requests that started kind of trickling in, and then just walking into a space and being recognized when I didn't even realize that that's where I was at. So I think that those were like little moments where I guess I kind of realized that, okay, people are watching, people are paying attention. I guess the good part about it too is that not realizing that it was happening and just still doing it for the love of doing it and nothing else is, I guess, why I feel sometimes that maybe I didn't yet, because that's, I'm so closed off from that part of it. But yeah.
For me, I think engaging in the public and events like this and getting recognized for, you get to be known when you're going to different places like events, and I guess networking and everything, that kind of helped me to realize, okay, this is big.
There's more to do, right?
Like what Julie said, I don't know if I'll ever feel like I made it. There's always more to do, more ideas to realize, and but something that was really exciting for me was being commissioned to create some geometric designs for Avatar: The Last Airbender. That really, that was really amazing, and I'm still really excited about that. And then when I watched the show, all the fake fur covered up my designs. I pulled it too real for and then being selected for the Banff Indigenous Haute Couture residency, the one I was in with Julie, that is a big turning point too, that just to have that recognition as a designer at that level. But every day I'm working hard. I don't know if I'll ever feel like I made it, but again, I'm sewing because I love to create. I love working with my hands. It's healing and carrying on these skills and traditions.
Yeah, I think that they said it all. I think my first big break was when I went to New York for New York Fashion Week, and I got to share our Inuit culture on one of the most largest global stages that there is. That gained a lot of recognition for me and my brand, and from there I've had like Milan and Paris reach out to me, which I just came back from there a couple of weeks ago, or maybe it's a month now, I don't know. Everything is just a blur, everything goes so quickly, but for me it's important too to showcase other Inuit artists in my work. For example, when I went to New York, my music was all Inuit artists. We had Beatrice Deer, Tienta, and Pitsik, part of my music down there. My background for the show was all footage of From Home, which was by Eldred Allen of Bird's Eye Inc. And it's just most of the models that are brought down there were from Home were Inuit from Nunatsiavut and Nunavut. So it's nice to be able to share in the, what do you call it, Christina? Community there. It's nice to be able to share that, and same as wherever I travel, I try to incorporate other artists' work into my designs as well, and just uplift and inspire one another.
I love that. All four of these ladies were practicing the IQ values here, right? Being so humble in their answers. So how has our traditional clothing inspired your work today?
For me, it's I love our traditional clothing. I I think it's the most beautiful, and it is my main how do you call it, inspiration. All my clothing are about our culture, our tradition, and I think, well, that's what I do. It's all about my culture.
Well, I think it's a huge part of my inspiration, not just the traditional clothing, but everything that's, but I can't hide the fact that I'm also my dad is also French, so he's a settler, and that's a big part of who I am as well. So, like I mentioned earlier, Beatrice and I collaborated, were commissioned actually, to create a piece for out of sealskin, and going to the drawing table and actually using a traditional Atlantic pattern and kind of like breaking that down and breaking it apart and then recreating it using our traditional materials but making it look so different, using geometric designs but creating a piece that was very contemporary, also sparked something. So it became even more important, I think, that to recognize that our patterns exist. Our patterns are, they've always been a source of inspiration. I have all of my grandmother's patterns, and so a big part of what I've done is adapting it. I never learned how to create a pattern. I learned how to cut it down and recreate something using a pattern that exists, and I think that that's always been a part of me. So being able to kind of take that another step further has been a big part of my process and journey, and but taking it beyond that as well. Like I don't speak the language, but I feel the language is really important, and being able to incorporate my journey with I guess not knowing how to speak the language as part of my process as well. And the land. The land is a huge part of my inspiration every day. I just recently ordered a custom piece, and my color palette was a photo of our landscape at a certain time of year because that's what I want, so so everything that's from home is a huge part of my inspiration and a huge part of my process and the story, because I think every piece kind of has a story. It comes from somewhere.
How our traditional clothing inspires your current work?
Yeah, our traditional clothing is so beautiful, practical, functional, made to fit. It's already couture. And initially I was trying to recreate the same things that my nana made, that my mom made. But then, eventually I veered off that path and started trying different patterns, creating different colorways, and just new materials, using sequins and sealskin. You never really see that combination in nature. And then just in everything that I create, you could see the traditional clothing influence. But I'm also thinking, like for today's Inuit, we're in 2024, so I want to create, more something that's contemporary, that speaks of who we are today as well. But a lot of the values, traditional values, like working with what I have, finding solutions when I run out of materials, upcycling, thrifting leathers and old fur coats, that's all an important part of my practice. And I'm even delving into the impractical, so creating thigh-high pink sealskin boots, those are really going to be practical, up north, but they look amazing on the runway. So I guess just creating wearable art that tells a story, that our people feel proud to see that representation, to wear those clothes, when you're wearing something custom made, it makes you stand taller and feel proud to be who you are.
Oh my goodness, these guys are amazing. I love you. Same, I absolutely feel the exact same way. My mom, when she taught me how to sew, it was always, you had to make sure that your stitches were tight, your patterns, everything was done correctly, and if you didn't do it correctly, you take it apart and you do it again. And that has stuck with me throughout my entire practice, and that's what I practice all the time is quality work. But yeah, the land, the ocean, the water, everything influences my creative process, so that's something that I'm very connected to as well. I really love going back home in the summertime especially, and just getting out on the land, out to the cabin, doing the berry picking, doing the hunting, doing the fishing, and all that stuff. It all has an influence on the work that I do, so yeah.
That is for sure. It's so different when you're an urban Inuk and then you long for the sound of the land underneath your feet. I've got videos on my phone of just walking on the snow up north and same with like the crunch of the tundra in Cambridge. Yeah, I get it. So let's start with April. What's one thing that you're most proud of or something that you're excited about?
Before we started, I asked Cora not to put me first ever.
You just said first.
No, actually one piece, I'm proud of all of the work that I do and all of the support that I have, but one piece that I am really proud of is the water dress that I created out of leather pieces, and it resembles raindrops, and it's connected by a silver chain, and then there's some beads on there as well. But it's a call to action for clean drinking water in the north, because not all of our communities have access to clean drinking water. And fashion is actually a great way to bring awareness to these issues that we face today. And a lot of my work resembles that as well. There's, so much thought that goes into the process of creating. So that's one of the main pieces that I'm proud of, is the water dress.
As you should be.
Thank you.
For me right now, I'm super excited about digital elements in design, and these are things that I've learned during my 2 residencies at Banff. I did one again this year, and the focus was on digital embellishments. So I was able to use the laser cutter to engrave images of the Qinnirajaattuq, the Pingo Canadian landmark, onto an old leather coat, which then I used those strips to adorn my jacket that was also inspired by our caribou skin clothing. And the 3D printed Ilgap snow goggles, that was really exciting for me because I just didn't have the skills or the materials to carve them out of wood or bone or stone. So it was a huge learning experience to go through the design process and experiment with getting them digitally printed, and then just seeing the positive response when I shared this online. And of course, everyone was asking, are they for sale? But I'm still, experimenting, and it's healing too, because I'm able to create these pieces of material culture that I might not have had access to otherwise, because I'm an urban Inuit. And then something that April also does in her work is digitally printing sealskin onto fabric. So she's got a whole collection of that. I have fabric that I printed, something very similar. You know, we're thinking alike here. So all that is really exciting, and I always think of like my nana, even my mom and dad and our elders, you know, what would they think to see what all of us are doing now? Because just within 2 generations, our life has changed so rapidly, or even 1 generation. Like my mom was born in a tent on the tundra, and now I'm 3D printing snow goggles. And she was raised on seal meat, and so yeah, we've come so far, and that's what I'm really excited about, is the digital aspect right now.
Oh my goodness, that's such a tough question to answer. There's so many things to be excited about. I guess, well, right now I'm working on a project with haute couture fashion designer Jean-Claude Poitras, and it's a beautiful project in collaboration with Coué Festival and LaSalle College, where 11 Indigenous Québécois were selected to represent each of the nations in Quebec to recreate his vintage pieces into a piece to represent our culture, our people. And so having the opportunity to work on this with him and his team of people, and having all those resources, but having been selected to represent the Inuit of Quebec, I think is like it's pretty big, but it's a really exciting project that's going to be presented in the communities. There's going to be a touring exhibit, so it's a really amazing opportunity to come back to the importance of being inspired by our traditional clothing and our land and our culture, and bringing all those elements into a piece of clothing. It's very exciting. I never, 3 years ago, never would have imagined that I'd be working on something like that right now. So it's very exciting.
For me, I'm excited about being on my own, doing my own work at home. And because I was with a company for many years, and being on my own, I love it. And I'm excited about future, about what's going to be in what I'm going to be doing, because there's a lot to do.
That's wonderful. So what is a piece of advice that you would give your younger self, or something that you wish that you would have learned earlier? Christina hasn't started us off. Let's pick on you now.
Advice for my younger self, or young designers starting out: set goals. So, like, where do you see yourself in 1 year, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years? What do you want to do with your work? Like, do you want to start a business? Do you want to be on the runway? Are you willing to create the same thing over and over to meet the demand of online sales? So really think about what you want to do, where you want to go, what's it going to take to get there. And this is something I tell my children, is imagine yourself as a fashion designer. So every day when you get up, what is that fashion designer going to do? Are we going to, start scrolling and play online games, or are you going to get up and start sewing, working on different patterns? So everything you do is going to lead you toward your goals or away from your goals. Also have the courage to put yourself out there, show your work. If nobody sees it, then how will they know who you are and what you do? That's been really instrumental in getting me to this stage so far, is just sharing my work online. And believe in yourself. You have the skills, you have the knowledge. It's You know, it's our blood memory, it's your birthright, and you can learn by doing as well. You don't always need a formal education to chase your dreams.
I think the biggest piece of advice I would give myself as a young person is to take the time to listen more and to be more patient. I'm extremely grateful for having had the opportunity to learn from the people I learned from, my grandmother in particular. But we lost her so young, and I feel like hindsight is always 20/20, and having taken more time just sitting there in that living room with her, and not getting so pissed off and having to undo those stitches so many times over, but actually listening to the value in that, and really, when somebody wants to teach you something, you can't put a price on that. It's worth so much, and there's no way of knowing where it's going to bring you or how it's going to impact you later on. But there's going to be a moment in your life where you're going to realize that was so important. So I think just being mindful of those moments and really taking them for what they are, and giving yourself the time, the space, and the energy to really focus on that, I think is the number one thing that I would recommend to people based on my hindsight.
I absolutely agree with everything that you guys just said. I would also say to just be authentic and share your culture with the world, because there's so much space out there for all of us to share. Don't be afraid to reach out for help. Starting a career in this field of work is a lot of hard work. There's blood, sweat, and tears that goes into it. Have a great support system. Don't be afraid to reach out for help. Lean on people when you can. For me, I'm always here if anybody ever needs help with starting a business, because I know how much work goes into it. And I'm sure these guys will say the same thing. So just seek support, ask for help, and stay true to your roots.
She said it all. I guess I would advise anyone, for me, if they want to have a business in clothing, is to work with somebody who is already there first and learn, and that's what I would advise. And because I didn't do that, that's what I would advise myself back then.
Fantastic advice, ladies. We are going to open up the floor for any questions.
Yes, that was fantastic. Okay, so we have a little bit of time for questions, and I know this is a room full of seamstresses and sewers, and I just want to say, Victoria Okpik makes the most beautiful parkas. They're just better than anything. Julie Grenier has this incredibly beautiful color sense. It's like you can teach color theory at a grad school. And Taalrumiq does these amazing videos. If you don't follow her on Instagram and on TikTok, she does it's the futurist kind of work that you've been doing is so exciting. And did everybody see April's water dress recently? I know, it was oh yeah, it's just beautiful. And we asked Cora, you did a wonderful job as a moderator, but I feel like we'd be remiss to not mention that Cora is also hopefully starting her own fashion line in the near future as well. So as we go to the Q&A, I feel like you can transform into artists now for this part of the question period. I'll do the Q&A. Hi.
Hi. Hello. Thank you all for sharing your stories. Very inspiring. I had, I guess, a simple question. my girlfriend was looking for a winter jacket recently, right? But I've noticed there's a couple non-Inuit companies that today use a lot of the traditional Inuit styles, like I think Taalrumiq it's called, they have Panelists, and I think there's a couple other companies. I wanted to know what your thoughts are on that.
I think like we're still in a time where we're reclaiming and relearning aspects of our culture and still, getting our footing in some areas. So it can be a really painful thing to see non-Inuit, non-Indigenous companies profit off of Inuit designs. And that's something that's just a reality that we're up against every day. And there's no way that we can compete with some of these big companies. Like in my case, I'm the one who's doing all the sewing by myself. So it could take me months to create one piece. And then that's another aspect is there's this sort of predatory vibe that some companies, when they see a up and coming Indigenous designer, you're so hungry for your big break, and then that can make you a target for these predators. And I had that experience too. There was this well-known fur business that wanted to use my name producing their mix to sell at different events. And you just have to really advocate for yourself to be properly compensated, and there's copyright issues, and that's a whole other topic, I think, is the use of Inuit designs in commercial spaces or these non-Inuit businesses. And I've spoken out against, there was a company that improved the ulu and are mass producing it. So a lot of people were speaking out against that, and I chose to highlight an actual Inuit business, and that brought me so much lashback and hate. So that's another thing that I deal with. So it's a lot. And I guess what I'm trying to say is, when you can't support an Inuit artist, support an Inuit business, if it means waiting a month to have your coat made, then that's just the price you pay for Inuit excellence and Inuit fashion.
Yeah, I just wanted to add also that I think having companies like that bring in, or I guess take ownership of our traditional designs, it also brings a lot of other questions from non-Indigenous, non-Inuit people who wonder then, because we get upset about these companies taking over our designs, then there's the question of, well, does that mean we're not allowed to wear your designs? And I think that that's also another, no, you can absolutely wear our designs, but just make sure that it's authentic, that it's made by Inuit, and that it's not something that's been appropriated by a mass production house.
Well, I just want to advise, just make sure that it's authentic when you're buying it. Authentically made by the Indigenous or Inuit. That's what I'm checking all the time now. If the owner is actually Indigenous or Inuit.
The fake fur is not as warm as the real fur. And it lives forever as a microplastic. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I agree with everything that everyone said. Just to reiterate what Victoria said here, just make sure you do your research and make sure that who you are buying from is authentic, Inuit, Indigenous made.
Hi, so I was wondering how you go about, organizing your runways. Do you ever kind of have a certain color scheme, like, oh, this design is going to go first, or do you ever have kind of a certain theme to the way you curate your runways?
A lot of people in the room are like, good question.
Yes.
teach us.
It's kind of funny because actually when I was at Milan there about a month ago, I didn't have a lineup. Everything was just so busy beforehand and getting ready. And they come out and they're like, "What's your lineup?" I'm like, "Looks good, go."
That's me too.
Yeah, and I guess it depends on the show that you're doing. I with the project we're working on now, we're gonna have so it's a runway show, but with one look for each artist to represent each region. But like the one look, we have the stage for like 15 minutes, so we do have to think about not just how we want the piece to be presented or worn, but everything else. And so, there's a colors, we're working with mood boards, and I guess it depends on the show, and it depends on the piece, and it depends on how you want to present it. Working with mood boards, and then going from there and deciding on how, like what kind of vibe you want to project, So there is a color attached to that as well. So yeah, there's definitely a lot of elements to think about, but it's fun.
It's usually crazy. So whenever I'm in a show, I don't even pay attention sometimes.
It's hard to focus.
Yeah, it's too busy, and like she said, not enough time, so you just kind of rush everything. Even though you kind of organize it in a way how it's gonna go, but sometimes it doesn't go that way.
When I'm planning my looks, I think about the overall impact, what story I'm trying to tell, what feeling or vibe that I want to convey. So not only do you have the garment, but then accessories, and that's I've learned since instead of trying to create it all myself, I can reach out to my community of other Inuvialuit and Gwich'in designers to say, can I use your earrings for this look, or can I put your shoes in with this look? That way they're supporting other designers and uplifting them as well. And then on the day of the runway, backstage, I tell my models, so Inuvialuit, Inuit, Indigenous youth are watching. I want them to see someone who's strong, someone who's powerful, someone that's amazing, that they can see themselves in. And that's the vibe that I typically want for my shows. And I just think about the first few looks are usually more traditional, and then leading to contemporary, and then I save my most impactful piece for the end. And then also thinking about your music. So I stream a lot of Inuit artists, trying to find the right songs to match the vibe that I want. And again, that's a great way to support Inuit singers and songwriters as well. So it's a whole holistic process, but it's super exciting. It's crazy backstage, and it's a lot of fun.
Hi. You all work with a lot of amazing material, and I was wondering how much of a challenge is that to source the material or to establish a good relationship with people who can provide you with the material?
Material sourcing for me is an ongoing process. I have my family and community at home who think of me for certain traditional materials. My mom is really supportive. She's in her 70s, but she still takes the time to clean materials and send them to me, knowing that I can use them in my art or fashion. Ideally, I would love to use all traditional materials, but it's just not always possible. So then I do end up using commercially tanned seal pelts, which also are suitable for a southern climate because they won't biodegrade as fast as naturally tanned. And I mentioned upcycling and thrifting, like furs and leathers, trying to think about sustainability. So again, too, that's just part of the creative process. That's how I hunt and gather. I go shopping and thrifting for my materials.
For my products, it's it's always like my sealskins are tanned and my furs are tanned, because if they are done traditionally, you gotta take care of them pretty much. Like make sure they're not, especially when it's hot out, make sure they're in a cool place and like that. But for the industrially tanned, you don't really have to take care of them too much as long as they're not directly in the sun. So my products are not traditionally done. I mean, like the furs and stuff like that.
I have a question. Does any of you have a disaster story where you learned something from it, and either it being a deadline you didn't need or anything? That I think that would be interesting to hear. Like if you learned something from it and what it was specifically.
Did you say a success or a failure? A failure question. That's a good one.
I had so many failures I learned from.
Let's hear one of them.
I have a whole like box and bags full of failed projects that will never see the light of day. It's just all my successful or like pieces that I'm happy with that I'm presenting and putting out there. But everything is a learning experience. You know, we learn by doing. And I kind of just think about my mindset. I don't look at it as failure, but as a learning opportunity. And it's going to teach me to do better next time, or have more control, or, you know, like just improve the sewing process.
Yeah, I'll echo what you're saying also, because I think most of the failure projects, and I have a lot of started and unfinished projects, but a lot of the failure projects do end up turning into success. Like I always dig back into those badly cut or badly sewn or just don't work colors or just, and you know what doesn't work on Monday might be phenomenal for Saturday. So I think there's really also just kind of revisiting all of those failed attempts and then creating something new and different with it.
And I think too, one thing important to remember is that we are all human, and you know, just work at your own pace. Don't feel pressured. Don't take on too many tasks at a time where you do feel like you're pressured. You know, to meet a deadline. Sometimes it's unavoidable, but your mental health is top priority.
So I'll just let you know about what the line that I'm working on right now. It actually came from a failure idea, because I have an idea where I wanted to see our traditional ideas on garments and like for professional wear. And I had drawn out some things and it just wasn't coming out the way that I had it in my head. So I went and had a bath and I was like, how can I do this? Like it's not getting from here to on paper. And so I have come up with the idea that my line is actually going to support other Inuit artists where I'm going to purchase their drawings, put it on garments, and then they're going to receive a portion of the proceeds from the sales. Plus, being Inuk, I wanted to make sure that we were supporting community, so that artist is also going to be able to choose a non-for-profit from their home community that'll also get a portion of the sales. So that was how I turned my lemons into lemonade.
You have our last question.
I was just curious about what is your biggest challenge? What kind of challenge is like? Oh yeah, yeah, I would have to say definitely funding.
all of these events that we have to go to succeed as fashion designers and to get our name out there really requires a lot of money. And trying to source funding can be very difficult. Sometimes you're fortunate and you run into some grants, and ever so grateful for those. But if you're just starting out, it can be really difficult to try to find avenues of funding. So again, I would also emphasize on reaching out to people that you know who's already in that field of work, and they would gladly help you because, like I said before, we've all been there and we know what it's like. So, yeah.
I think time is also a huge, there's not enough time in a day, but also the work that we do, especially when I'm incorporating traditional practices, which are very time consuming, especially when you're working with the raw materials. I guess not explaining, but forcing people to understand that process is very time consuming, and that time does have a value, is, I think, a big challenge when promoting our work, our art.
For me, it's trying to get help to do, to try to find grants. That is my biggest challenge for me.
There's a few. One of them, the biggest one, might be imposter syndrome. I'm a mixed Inuit, I'm also Gwich'in. So sometimes I feel like I'm not enough, and who do I think I am trying to represent my culture or my community or my family? You know, I struggle with those types of thoughts. So if you ever feel something like that, don't feel alone. You know, we all experience that. Trying to balance family life and professional life. And then, yeah, funding is a big one. I feel like I'm paying people to wear my stuff. I'm not quite there where, you know, I'm, you know, making money, but it's hard to find funding specifically for fashion. There's not a lot of support. So that's kind of what pushed me into selling earrings, because those are good sellers. It enables me to make enough money to purchase materials to do the fashion, the other things that I love.
Hello again. So I was wondering, what are your thoughts on non-Inuit, when non-Inuit want to buy your traditional designs? In your mind, is that appropriation or appreciation?
Buy our designs as in the clothing that we make.
I'd say appreciation. It's really, sorry, that's my son. My son that keeps trying to call me, and it's on Do Not Disturb, so it must be urgent. Yeah, I definitely say appreciation, and I think that that's where, like we were talking about earlier, about houses that will appropriate designs and recreate them. That's definitely appropriation. But I think it's still important to speak to the designer, though, whoever they may be, because I think there are some cases where it might be seen as appropriation. I've spoken to some ribbon skirt makers, for example, where some ribbon skirts are made specifically for ceremonial purposes, and they're not intended to be worn by non-Indigenous people or even people that are not from that specific nation. So I think that it's important to kind of have conversations with your designers and your artists to find out, because I think very often, okay, there's definitely something going on. Just step away. Yeah, I'm gonna have to. But yeah, so that's my piece.
Just to quickly talk about appropriation versus appreciation. For me personally, everything that I'm creating and trying to sell is not like sacred or closed practice. So I would say everyone is welcome to wear it, to purchase and wear it. I'm happy with that. And my people were always known to be generous. You know, you'll see our traditional clothing on non-Inuit galleries, like in our historical photos. So yeah, best to talk to the artist.
Mine are, well, everyday wear, so I don't mind. I mean, everybody's welcome to buy. Just don't make mass production out of it.
Yeah, same. This question actually is a question that I had myself one time when I asked Christina. And it's always important to have someone too that you can lean on and seek advice from. As for me, everything that I make is ready to wear pretty much for anyone who wants to wear it. If it is something that is sacred or on that line, it won't go anywhere to be sold.
No, it's just, I haven't formed the question in my head yet, but it's some talk about imposter syndrome and also being mixed and so on. And I'm just curious, do you have more thoughts into that, or like, how do you call it? I don't know how to call it. I work as an artist myself, and I'm very keen on working towards being like mixed. I'm half Danish, half Normandic, and you know that gives a lot of thought for myself and feelings and so on. So I'm just very curious when you mentioned it too. How do you work with it in your designs? Maybe mixed or have like, does it give sense what I'm trying to form the question? Like, because two of you mentioned that you have your mixed or you have the imposter syndrome, and how do you work with that in your work? Like, I make art pieces because that's where I can transform it into a language. And I know you, of course, do it also maybe do it in your design, but can you put words on that? Possible?
I think everyone knows what you're talking about. My son's alive. Was it you? Speaking of imposter, I think it's something that I embrace now. It's just part of who I am, and for a long time, I was dealing with the imposter syndrome, like Christina mentioned earlier, and I think it was taking up a lot of space in my head. So it took a lot of work to get through that. A big part of that for me, though, was the fact that I don't speak Inuit, and I think that that's more what I deal with than the fact that I'm both French and Inuit. So it's, I guess it's a process, and I think like April mentioned it a few times, having people that you can reach out to, that can talk to you, that you can talk to, that you can. I think it's important. It helps get through that process, but it's just it's part of who we are. But it's not something that I hide either. So when I'm creating things, or when I'm speaking, it's something that I mention all the time because it's part of who I am, and it's, I think, really just more about going through a process of acceptance, and once I accepted that that's who I am, then it doesn't become a barrier anymore so much. But it's not easy, and even though I sometimes feel like I'm completely through that part, one day you just go right back to that headspace. So it's finding those mechanisms that help you get through it.
I think just voicing these feelings and letting it out makes you feel less alone in these things. And so that's something I've done through my work, is just talking about being both Qinnirajaattuq and Wiccan. You know, historically they were enemies, so there was a lot of like lateral violence, things like that. But just being able to voice that through my work has touched hearts of other people who are the same as me, or other mixed people as well, and helps them to feel seen or represented. And I think just being open and honest about how we're feeling. And I have to remind myself that, you know, I'm an Inuk woman, born from an Inuk woman, born from an Inuk woman, and so on and so on. Yeah, so it's my matrilineal birthright. And also to just be proud of, you know, all your ancestors, all your different parts.
Okay, I think we have, no, that was just a hand like this. Now you have to ask a question, no.
Thank you. This might be a question, it could also just be food for thought. But have any of you, and you touched on this a little bit earlier around set design, but have any of you thought about or seen or maybe had conversations around crossovers with architectural design or exhibitionary design? Any opportunities or moments where this might kind of flourish into something else?
Are you talking about like museum exhibits, gallery?
Yeah, where design might be kind of broadened out into
Or clothing design or heritage design patterns, geometries might kind of flourish into other broader contexts?
Yeah, I think you should meet this artist named Mark Bennett. He's got a background in like the geometrical science architecture thing. But for me, branching out into like gallery, museum exhibits, that type of thing, I don't think there's really a difference with like what we do as wearable art, in my opinion. You know, we're showing it on the runway. That's mainly our exhibit space, but through my program that I'm in now, my hope is to create a body of work that is fashion, but fashion art, if that makes sense. I don't see the distinction.
We can thank our panelists for this fantastic presentation.